I don't understand how any Christian leader in the United States can sit by and not say something about that. How do we wind up supporting an Al-Qaeda leader? I thought we were anti-Al-Qaeda.
I thought so too.
So that's that's treason, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So Tucker Carlson recently came out swinging against the Washington war regime, exposing here why Americans don't want any fruitless foreign wars. He also gets into some of the most disastrous effects of those wars, including in Syria, and how Israel is influencing U.S. foreign policy. This is in the context of a conversation with Anna Kasparian, so let's get Tucker's viewpoint on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
You know, like the speech you gave at Turning Point, you said a few things in there that I might not agree with, but like the overall message was so courageous, and I never thought in a million years I would hear it at a conservative conference. Never.
It's just interesting. Well, I mean, the truth is wherever it is, and you try to recognize it. But I hope I'm going to give you my text, and I want you to text me, if you will, criticism of what you're saying now.
Okay.
Because I want to keep a list of people who are offended by what you're saying, just in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how could anyone be offended by what you're saying now?
Yeah. Well, it might not be.
I mean, you're not the criminal here.
Yeah. Well, let me just be honest with you. I think that most people who are going to attack me aren't even going to listen to this interview.
No,
it's just the fact that we're having a conversation with each other. But I take offense to people trying to police who I can talk to. In fact, the more they try to police me, the more I want to talk to the person they forbid me to speak to. Honestly, I've always been like that. I've been like that since I was a kid. My mom knows it better than anyone. I'm just a little bit rebellious, and I don't like to be told what to do. I hate it.
And what to think.
Yeah.
And who you can talk to. I mean, that's a core decision. Who do I associate with?
Yeah.
Who are my friends? Who am I having dinner with? Who do I marry? I mean, if you allow other people to make those decisions for you, you're not free.
Yeah, totally right. And I had to agree with Anna there. Some of the things he did say were certainly what would be considered out of place for a conservative conference, that, if you dare to criticize Israel, that's not anti-Semitic. He got cheers for that. He got cheers talking about how the most likely scenario is that Jeffrey Epstein was working as a Mossad agent. He got cheers for that at this conservative conference. This is a, conference packed with a lot of Zionists. And for the first time, you're seeing major figures on the right, like Tucker and Candace Owens and some others, talk about the folly that is the Israel first mentality. And I'm kind of with Anna, too, when it comes to the barrage of people saying you shouldn't talk to some person. Generally means that it's actually probably a good idea to talk to that person, or at least it should incentivize you to that point, because shutting down conversations is the way of the regime. It's the way of the establishment. It's the way to shut down what might be valid points or truth that, the political mainstream and the corporate media doesn't want you to see. So, yeah.
No, you're not. And oh my God, what a terrible career path to be a journalist who doesn't get to have conversations like with people that they're curious. I'm curious about you. I am. Right. You were a neocon.
Yeah, I was.
It's
hard to believe that.
It is hard to believe that. I became politicized in the lead up to the Iraq invasion in 2003.
Yes.
I was in high school, and I remember in 2002, I went to like a hippie, magnet school, and we had Peace Day annually. And I remember giving a speech in 2002 to make the case against the preemptive war in Iraq. And I remember, you're going to laugh at this. I remember in English class, we were reading a play, The Glass Menagerie, which I found deeply boring. And I had I had a cutout of a New York Times article in which Bill Kristol was one of the people the reporter interviewed. And, Bill Kristol loves war.
Yeah.
Hardcore neocon. And I just remember just sitting in that English class, reading his quotes and seething over it and thinking to myself, I can't wait to one day get an opportunity to confront him. And I actually did get that opportunity. It wasn't about war, but it was a Politicon panel debate about healthcare. And, I kind of brought up the fact that Israel has universal healthcare and Americans don't.
What did he say?
He was so unprepared. There's a picture of him, like he has index cards, someone wrote notes down for him, and he's just fumbling with the index cards. He doesn't know what to do. And then once the whole panel discussion was over, someone who was with me overheard him say, "Damn it, she came prepared." Something along those lines.
Yeah, it's arrogance. It's people who've been told since they were small that they're brilliant. You know, Bill Kristol, Ted Cruz. I mean, it does distort you, and it actually makes you dumb, paradoxically, over time.
Yeah, no question about that. And man, I have a similar experience, but on the other side, I was a neocon. This is embarrassing to admit now, but I was giving speeches about how it was a good thing to invade Iraq in 2003. I was saying that, you know, Richard Pearl is right. Donald Rumsfeld is right. Paul Wolfowitz is right. You know, I was echoing the talking points of Bill Kristol. Again, very embarrassing to admit now. Maybe some viewers of this channel will be surprised to hear me, admit that. But yeah, I mean, Tucker was in a similar situation. He supported the war in Iraq and later admitted that it was a disaster. I did the same in the years following. And, you know, there's something to be said about the integrity, I think, of people that do that, admit they're wrong, because that runs so contrary to what we see in terms of Washington politics and business as usual in Washington. And, you know, I think people do have redemptive arcs. I mean, even if you're a Christian or you're not, you know, just an example I would point to is Paul or Saul. Saul was once, you know, a deeply devout Jew that persecuted and hunted down Christians, and persecuted them to the point that they would die. They'd be, you know, killed. And, you know, he eventually turned and followed Jesus. You know, he was blinded on the road to Damascus and found redemption in following Jesus. So this is just, you know, an example, and there's many such examples that could be applied to this.
Definitely.
Yeah, because you're never pressed.
Got to stay humble.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
It's not hard for me.
I feel that the interests of Americans and how they feel about going to war with Iran, for instance, right? Most Americans do not want to go to war with Iran. And it didn't matter, okay? The United States bombed Iran's nuclear sites on behalf of Israel anyway, which could have led to a full-blown hot war. It didn't, because of Iran having restraint. But we're not done yet. And
but
so
don't you feel ashamed that it didn't lead to nuclear war? This is the new line.
I know.
You are wrong. You're an idiot.
That's, by the way, that line is stupid.
How dare you worry about that?
Yeah, we're not. By the way, it's not over yet. And don't get too cocky. For the people making that point, don't get too cocky.
But why is it shameful to worry about a nuclear war or worry about a World War III?
Yeah, no question about that. I mean, and I totally agree with her. It was Iranian restraint that gave Trump the off-ramp to get out of there, because he was putting on his social media and on Truth Social, hey, regime change is on the table. The way he put it was, if Iran doesn't want to make itself great again, why not regime change? And he was basically, you know, having Mossad agents in his briefing rooms, facilitated through John Ratcliffe, the CIA director. This has come out due to Gray Zone reporting. And she's right. This hasn't gone away. This is going to come back. Netanyahu's talked about how close Iran is to a nuclear weapon for my entire lifetime, basically. Since the early 90s, we have quotes from him continually saying they're months, weeks, seconds, milliseconds away from acquiring a nuke. And there's indications that they got a lot of the enriched uranium out of Fordo, which was one of those 3 facilities where giant motorcades arrived in the weeks before that. Plus, before that, they had about 8 years after the JCPOA was torn up when it comes to the U.S. portion of that by Trump in his first term. So yeah, this is going to come back up. They're going to want regime change again. Neocons will continue to clamor for it. Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro won't change their tunes on that one. And this is not going to be pretty. It's, you know, almost incentivized, I think, the Iranians to acquire a nuke now, seeing how they were bullied by the biggest bullies on the block and seeing how the U.S. treats North Korea versus Libya. They overthrew the latter, and the former enjoys, you know, more normalized relationships because they have nukes.
Why is that? It's being held up by the normal tiny brain people as, like, you know, evidence that you're just a ridiculous person. Your prediction was wrong.
Right. Well, I mean,
we didn't have a nuclear war. Shut up.
Well, maybe those folks have a point. Maybe we're the baddies. Okay. Yeah. Maybe we should be more concerned about profits for, you know, bomb makers and weapons manufacturers and private contractors and the mercenaries that are currently working over in Gaza to shoot and kill people as they're waiting for humanitarian aid.
So how does that, it does feel like I've spent 35 years not talking about that topic because, one, I don't really have on a native level, like super strong views about it. It's not my country. I wish everyone well in every country. And I mean that. However, it just got so in my face that I had to like say 4 things about it, for which I've been, spent the rest of my life trying to deal with that, the effects of being called those names. But I feel like all of a sudden, like people you would not expect to weigh in on this, like, actually, this is too much.
Yeah. And I love it. I'm glad that that's happening. And I hope
you feel that there's been a change.
I do, especially on the right. You even see, podcasters that didn't really weigh in on these issues, like Theo Von weigh in on it and how disastrous and bloody and, harmful the genocide in Gaza is. Just to say the word genocide is a turnoff to, much of the neocon right and establishment right. But right-wing voices are starting to wake up to this. That's not just Pat Buchanan on the right anymore talking about this. It's Tucker and Candace Owens and Alex Jones sometimes talking about it, Daryl Cooper and others who have sincere problems with U.S. aid to Israel. And Anna was right to point out that rank hypocrisy earlier about how Israeli citizens have universal health care, but Americans don't. And by the way, you don't have to be a fan of universal health care to point out that hypocrisy, that the U.S. is funneling its money to Israel, who enjoys that kind of benefit from it and that kind of weaponry that they get from the United States. It's subsidized by the United States. And again, you don't have to be a fan of that to point out the hypocrisy there. And even when they consider it defensive funding to Israel, like the Iron Dome funding that just happened last week that AOC voted for, which she's getting some criticism for, which is interesting, is that gives Israel the ability to militarize in other ways that are not related defensively. And that's why Israel has attacked 4 of its neighbors since October 7th. It's laid claim to West Bank settlements in Syria and Lebanon. It's bombed Yemen. It's consummating a genocide in Gaza. And it bombed Iran, which, by the way, undermined U.S. foreign policy interests in trying to normalize relationship with Iran and create a new, inspections regime, which is off the table now. They kicked out IAEA inspectors now. And, Israel remains the only power in the region with a secret nuclear weapons program.
I do feel it. I mean, definitely. If it were the Bush years and this whole scenario were playing out during those years, the kinds of things I've been hearing people say publicly, I would not have heard. But I think what's happening this time around is you really can't deny what you're seeing on the ground in Gaza. You can't deny what's happening in the West Bank, not just in regard to Palestinians, Palestinian Muslims, but also Palestinian Christians. You can't deny the fact that one and only Catholic church in Gaza was bombed, was attacked. You can't deny the fact that churches have been targeted in the West Bank as well. Like, people can lie to us as much as they want, but the videos are out there.
How do you blow up a church if you've got munitions, laser-guided munitions that are so sophisticated that they can take out, a guy in an SUV from 30,000 feet? How do you blow up a church with a giant cross on top of it?
It was just an accident, Tucker. It was an accident.
Like it's not the first church that's
no,
been blown
it's
up.
not.
Yeah, and Justin Amash's, I think, nephew or one of his close relatives was actually pulled out of the rubble, young toddler murdered by the Israeli government and Israeli militarism here. And, he's not the only one. There's 60 to 100,000 people that have died in Gaza, maybe up to 150,000 that are missing, many of which are dead. And they just continue using the same arguments. It's a disproportionate attack, and that might be putting it lightly because it's a genocide. They say it's human shields. Well, I'm sorry, the human shields argument would not fly anywhere else than in a place you're trying to devalue the civilians. That would not fly if, 20 children got kidnapped and brought to a local school, and then the U.S. government was like, oh, these criminals have human shields. We're just going to drop bombs and destroy the whole thing. That wouldn't fly. That only flies in cultures where you devalue the lives of certain people, which they're doing in Gaza. And they're not hiding the fact that they're talking relocation and transfer and concentration zones like in Rafah. This is being openly announced by the Israeli government. You have IDF soldiers killing Palestinians waiting in line for aid. All this is atrocities, and I hope more Christians end up speaking out against it. And, Tucker's exactly right.
And it wasn't an accident. Was it an
But
accident?
what is the answer? Can anyone get an answer?
I know the answer. Israel wants a Jewish state and they want to expand. They have something known as the Greater Israel Project. They intend to annex the whole of the West Bank. In fact, Miriam Adelson legally bribed Donald Trump to ensure that that happens. And Israel announced that that's what they're going to do, and they're doing it. When it comes to Gaza, I mean, Hamas is so dumb because the atrocities they committed on October 7th gave Netanyahu and the Israeli government the perfect excuse to essentially do what they've always wanted to do, which is take that land. They're going to take that land. That's what they want. They're going to ethnically cleanse whatever remains of the Palestinian people. They're going to force neighboring countries probably to absorb 2 million people. And then at the same time, they're going to have settlers move on in, rebuild Gaza. Jared Kushner, by the way, soon after October 7th happened, was like salivating on camera about how that's prime real estate. It's disgusting. But anyway.
How can you move 2 million people right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of the Greater Israel Project like she's talking about. This is the clean break strategy. This is what was decided by the Washington regime and the pro-right-wing Likud coalition and those that were the forerunners to that in the 90s when they, listed a bunch of countries they wanted to overthrow with Israel involvement. All of those have happened except for Iran. And guess which is the one they always talk about? They always try to put back on the table. It's regime change in Iran. This was a break from what was known as the Oslo Accords. And the Oslo Accords was a strategy in which the idea for Israelis was that we want to have peace in Gaza with the Palestinians, create a Palestinian state so that there would be a two-state solution. And then as a result, we could make peace with our Arab neighbors rather than these adversarial, wars that had happened in the 60s and 70s and at various times thereafter, many of which thereafter especially were started by Israel, invading Lebanon 1 billion times and things like that. But this was the break. The clean break was we're just going to overthrow these regimes. We're not going to have a second Palestinian state. We're going to overthrow regimes. We're going to get the U.S. to help us with that. And that's what's happened in Iraq and Syria and Libya. And they want Iran for sure. And Benjamin Netanyahu was complicit in all of it and supportive of all of it. He famously said, hey, if you overthrow Saddam, positive reverberations will break out throughout the region. We've all seen that video.
Well, there was a story published this week, I believe it was in the New York Times, where Netanyahu and the Israeli government was in talks with our government in regard to getting aid from the United States in moving Palestinians out of Gaza. So when they bombed the church, it's because they don't want the church. That land is supposed to be part of the Jewish
You're not
state.
allowed to use my tax dollars to bomb churches.
Well, that's what they're doing.
I'll put up with a lot of stuff, but I think that's... And I've said this 100 times, let me say it again. I don't understand how any Christian leader in the United States can sit by and not say something about that. And Mike Huckabee, who has been a pretty slavish, devotee of the state of Israel, and I don't mean that as a compliment, he's a very nice man, but I disagree with him strongly. Even Mike Huckabee came out and said, whoa.
Yeah.
You can't kill Christians.
And American citizens.
Yeah. But I don't understand why that's not. I mean, if that's not a red line, then there's no red line.
That's the truth, man. If you're an Israeli and Mike Huckabee is criticizing you, you've gone way over the top. He's the most devout Zionist maybe in the administration. Marco Rubio certainly is too. Mike Waltz certainly was too. There's others. Kennedy is a huge Zionist too. But when Huckabee gets angry about Israeli policy, it's insane. This won't change Huckabee, by the way. He'll go back to saying, hey, there's no such thing as West Bank settlements. That's just part of Israel. There's no such thing as Gaza. That's just Israel. And Israel should be able to acquire that territory, expand into the Greater Israel Project. But just this in kind of its just singular issue really reveals the madness that is the way that Israelis are behaving. And you have people out on Twitter saying, hey, the people huddled in that church trying to seek shelter, they chose their side. They're pro-Hamas. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's really ghastly and just despicable, if you ask me.
I mean, I think it should definitely be a red line. But let me just say, Mike Huckabee made a statement, and that's nice. It's more than Biden was willing to do. Talk is cheap. Are you going to cut funding? Are you going to stop sending over the 2,000-pound bombs that are destroying people's homes, universities, churches, refugee camps, hospitals? I mean, Gaza's leveled. Deir al-Balah is like the last remaining portion of Gaza that still has some structures that people can live in. And they're currently doing a ground invasion there. They got to destroy it, of course. I mean, it's so obvious what's happening, and it's so unjust. And this is the area where, what democracy? I have no power. The government's going to take part of my earnings that I worked really hard for, not to help my fellow American citizens who might need healthcare, who might have fallen on hard times and can't feed their families and need help with food assistance. It's not going to go to them. It's going to go toward the bombs that are terrorizing people in Gaza, the West Bank. By the way, it's going to expand further than that. I mean, they've already annexed part of Syria. The Syria war, that proxy war, it was a proxy war for a reason. Turkey wanted to have influence and control over the area where the Kurds are at. Obviously, Israel wanted to annex portions of it, and they've been doing it ever since Assad fell. And you have a former al-Qaeda leader as the current leader of Syria.
Yeah, she's right about that. Jelani, now in charge of Syria, was a former al-Qaeda member fighting U.S. troops there. Trump famously said he had a strong past. Well, what does he mean by that? This is a past fighting U.S. soldiers in Iraq and then establishing an al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. It was called al-Nusra. And then he's now the leader. And guess what? There's Christian beheadings there. There's killing of religious minorities like the Druze right now. And what's the neocon solution to that? Is that overthrow the regime again? And she's totally right about Israel, is that for all this talk, whenever you hear talk that might be considered as, this is showing adversarial attitudes toward Israel, I likened it to when Trump talked about how the end of the ceasefire, or the beginning of the ceasefire between Iran and Israel, he said, I hate the fact that Israel's violating the ceasefire. Those two have been fighting each other so long. They're just idiotic and erratic. And people took that as, a shot against Israel. Yeah, Trump actually means business. But she's right. Are they going to end the funding? No. Are they going to stop Israel from its genocide in Gaza? No. Actually, Trump greenlit the violation of that ceasefire he arranged as he stepped into the Oval Office. Are they going to stop sending military intelligence to Israel? No. Are they going to stop sending weaponry? No. Are they going to stop them from the Greater Israel Project? No. That's the truth. Are they going to make AIPAC register as a foreign lobby according to the FARA Act? No.
Who's trying to capitulate to Israel, but obviously it's not good enough because Israel's still bombing the crap out of Syria. It's unbelievable. I have no ability to change it. It seems like the electorate in this country have no ability to change it because it doesn't matter which party you vote for, whether it's a Democratic presidential candidate or a Republican presidential candidate, they're going to get elected and they're going to get dog-walked by whoever the prime minister of Israel is at the time.
How do we wind up supporting an al-Qaeda leader? I thought we were anti-al-Qaeda.
I thought so too. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. But I mean,
I have an answer. It was at Israel's behest. Israel wanted the Assad regime out of there because they viewed Assad as more adversarial to Israel because some funding flowed through Syria that went to Hezbollah. But guess what? Hezbollah didn't attack the United States on 9/11. I'm an American. I'm not an Israeli. If you're really America first, if you're really America only, Al-Qaeda is the enemy and not Hezbollah. And more than Al-Qaeda, it's my own government, by the way, because they tie themselves to these absurd causes and these absurd wars, these insane proxy wars and regime change operations and military strikes. But Hezbollah is not my enemy as an American. Yeah, they're brutal terrorists. Guess what? But that's Israel's responsibility to deal with. It's not the United States. So if they shoved $15 billion into Syria, that got into the hands of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda under Operation Timber Sycamore, beginning with Obama's presidency, but going through Trump's presidency. Trump ramped up that war. You have famous photos of McCain standing next to Al-Qaeda fighters there. This was treason in the highest order, and it's rarely brought up. The mainstream media totally buried this, Tulsi Gabbard made herself persona non grata to the Democrats for daring to bring this up, but that's the truth. And that's why the U.S. was involved on the side of al-Qaeda in Syria. It's Israel, Israeli influence in our government, and the military-industrial complex, and their will to continue funding wars that will end up in the profit of Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon.
This is seen throughout American history in regard to our foreign policy. I mean, we will fund the Taliban, we'll give them weapons to fight, the communists. We want to avoid communism. And then we turn on them, for obvious reasons after what happened on 9/11. But I mean, I think it's not.
Well, we were told 9/11 was done by al-Qaeda. So we've got to be pretty, that wasn't that long ago. We've got to be pretty anti-al-Qaeda because if they actually killed 3,000 Americans on 9/11, which everyone says they did, and I'm willing to believe that, then how in the world could we let any al-Qaeda even exist?
Because Israeli interests overrides American foreign policy and America first sensibilities. That's the answer. I hate to say it, but they have enormous influence over our legislators, over the deep state, over the presidency, and it's because of the Israel lobby. The best book on this is written by John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt called The Israel Lobby, and that's why. And it's becoming more and more noticeable even to people on the right, and I'm very glad to see that development.
Wouldn't you venture to say it's required to ask these questions if you want to be a journalist?
I would say, and I would also say, the Syria situation, I was always opposed to what we were doing in Syria. I understood exactly why we were doing it. We ended up killing or abetting in the murder of an awful lot of religious minorities, Alawites, a lot of Christians, and destroying the country. And, I was attacked for, you're an Assad apologist or whatever, but I don't know anything about Assad.
So are they al-Qaeda apologists?
Well, that's the thing. And we've gotten to a place now where it's really clear that the 3,000 American lives they say were lost on September 11th due to al-Qaeda are less important than whatever political or geopolitical consideration is driving our Syria policy.
Yeah, and it makes me sick.
So that's that's treason, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more than that. That's like a profound moral crime. And it's also a middle finger in the face of every American.
Definitely. Yeah.
If there's one thing we could expect our foreign policy would stay consistent on is we're anti-al-Qaeda because they killed 3,000 Americans.
No doubt. And that reveals one of the most tragic ironies that is the result of U.S. empire building and these senseless foreign wars that just kind of consume America's foreign policy regime and have for my entire life is that you're always, as a dissident, as an anti-war activist or someone with, small anti-war sensibilities sometimes, you're called, a Putin apologist. You're pro-Hamas. You're pro-Saddam. If you didn't want to invade Iraq and then occupy it for 20 years, you were pro-Saddam. If you didn't want to have a 20-plus year occupation of Afghanistan, hey, you chosen the side of al-Qaeda. But when you're never called an al-Qaeda apologist? When you're going against the war that Israel wants in Syria. When you're funding literally al-Qaeda in Syria to try to take down that regime. When groups that are terrorist groups get access to U.S. money directly from the U.S. Treasury, then no, you're not an al-Qaeda apologist. Then you're an Assad apologist because you don't want to take down this cruel villain that gassed his own people. Remember that whole propaganda story? That's what's happening here. You're only called a supervillain, a secret collaborator with the enemy when you oppose the regime's war of the day. That's how it's always been. That's how it's been my entire lifetime and before. If you didn't want to attack Vietnam and have a prolonged occupation there, you were pro-Ho Chi Minh and an obvious communist. They always do the same thing every single time. And I'm so glad more people on both the dissident right and dissident left are waking up to it. The old right had so many great principles in staying out of the world's affairs. They always called them isolationists, but many of them weren't. Guys like Ron Paul wanted to trade with all nations and engage in diplomacy. That's not exactly isolationist. That's openness. That's trade. That's good diplomacy. That's peace and sovereignty and mutual sovereignty. Whereas the interventionists don't look at the map and don't look at a globe and see a country they wouldn't want to bomb and replace with a regime that's, more favorable to them. But look at the favorable regimes to them and how they've turned out. In Syria, you have slave trading and Gaddafi's weapons scattered among sub-Saharan Africa. In Iraq, you have Islamic fundamentalists that are far worse than the secular Saddam, who himself was certainly a villain, but not worthy of dumping so many American lives and so much treasure into disrupting or replacing. Look at Syria. It's not controlled by a former Al-Qaeda fighter. All these instances, and there are more, are just insane. The regime change lead of the American foreign policy regime is just incredibly backward, and it will never get better until America rejects this line of foreign policy. It hasn't done that. Trump promised in some regard to be a repudiation of that, a repudiation of business as usual when it came to U.S. foreign policy, but he hasn't exactly been that. He's rearmed Ukraine. He's started a new war in Iran. He bombed Yemen for a month. In his first term, he exacerbated wars in both Syria and Yemen and used one of his sole vetoes to stop U.S. involvement in the latter. He ramped up bombing in Afghanistan in 2018 and 2019. He did normalize relations with North Korea. I think that's probably the best thing he ever did in his first term. But yeah, we're seeing the costs of these foreign wars, and it's not pretty. I'm glad it's being called out by both Anna and Tucker. There's a lot of common ground that can be had here. And it all starts with U.S. ties to Israel. It's fruitless. It's senseless. There's no reason to support the Israel first mentality, sending them billions of dollars while people suffer here through tax crises and, inflation crisis and, not being able to afford a basic standard of living, not being able to make ends meet. And yet the U.S. throws money into Israel's coffers and they provide their citizens, health care and all sorts of things. And again, I'm not in favor of universal health care, but it is pretty telling and hypocritical to see how costly those kind of programs are. But the U.S. still dumps money into those countries. So there we have it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is Tucker and Anna correct here? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Tucker also. Please consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking the join button below. If you join as a member, I will give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.